Sound off.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Sound Off. We are live finally. We've been trying to do a show like this for what has been like 3 or 4 weeks, guys.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
So summertime, it's okay. We kind of took a nice little break. So it's good to be back. Good to see everybody in the chat room. Thank you guys so much for being here. So before we get started tonight's topic, we're going to be talking about woke Christianity. And I had one thing I wanted to share with you guys. We are sponsored by, and I can't figure out how to do this. Hold, give me 1 second here. We are sponsored by a place where not only woke Christians and non-woke Christians buy their used new CDs. That is bornagainsound.com. So make sure you check that out. And somehow I will have the banner running along the side. Born Again Sound, that's where you can check it out. And actually, the funds go and support Take on the World TV. So you guys go and vinyl CDs, cassettes, posters, all that fun stuff. Go check it out. bornagainsound.com. The guy's pretty cool, is what I've heard. So, how are you guys doing tonight? How are you?
He's got a big collection. That's what I keep hearing about.
That's what I keep hearing. Yeah,
he's got a big collection. It's kind of out of control. I thought my collection was big until I met this guy.
Yeah, totally.
Everybody thought their collection was big until they met this guy.
No doubt, no doubt. Like, who even holds a candle to that?
That's what she said.
Oh, jeez.
It's the way it is.
Well, that is a perfect segue into tonight's topic, which is the ever-growing woke Christian movement. And, you know, obviously we see it, we deal with it in a mainstream, but the trickle-down effect that has been happening in what we would call woke Christianity, right? You know, a few years ago, probably woke meant something different. Means you awoke from something to truth. I think we experienced that.
They hijacked the word completely.
Yeah, for sure.
They wrecked it. Now it's like you're awoke instead of woke, just you're awoke or awakened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it didn't a lot of people say, you know, when they were coming to FE, they were.
Wow, people had pins, and like there's even people that had channels that were woke, and they've changed their channels since the entire lunacy of the communist progressive left.
Yeah. So tonight we're going to hopefully explain some stuff to the listener, as well as, you know, really how do we rectify this? How do we change that? We're going to be talking about woke Christianity versus biblical Christianity tonight, and what that kind of looks like, and what we should be striving for. So I think we may get censored. So let's try to keep our comments PC enough so that YouTube keeps us up. But you know, if there's enough stuff, if he did his show Roe versus Wade, so we're gonna be talking about that tonight. We're gonna be talking
pretty good as long as you don't do personal attacks. If you're talking generalities, it's usually personal directed attacks, and we'll get into these areas if we're going to be talking about LGBT. But as far as having opinions on these, to my knowledge, there's no problem with it. But again, just to let you know, guys, there's the new word, starts with G and ends with Oomers. That is now banned on YouTube and Twitter. Apparently, you cannot call. That just happened 2 days ago now. So, do you know what I'm referring to? You know what, pet groomers? You know when they groom the pets? Well, there's people that do it with children, and that word now is not allowed. So it's just interesting how things continually progress and get more insane as we move forward into this woke culture.
Wow.
Crazy.
All right. Well, we won't be dead naming tonight because that's been pretty big in the news.
That's another thing you can't do. Yes, that's right.
We can't dead name. If you guys don't know what dead name is, you can't call somebody by their previous gender that they once were, now that they're not. So no dead naming tonight. But let's jump into this. We got a few articles we're going to read, and we're just going to jump into some stuff. But the topic, or the thing that I said to you, Robbie, I'll start with that. when you're out there, you're watching stuff in the let's say the conservative circles, for example, you're seeing lots of former Democrat, liberal type people, coming to a conservative value, and then it becomes that they're standing on biblical principles. So they start teaching them, they start talking about them. It becomes a very consistent theme. And the one thing that I've noticed is that these people who are like baby Christians, or just re-strengthening their faith, they stand on more biblical principles than the majority of churches that we're seeing. Right, we're seeing churches that pander or stay very neutral to not offend. Are you guys noticing that in your circles as well?
I personally stopped going to church because I don't believe in it anymore. I know, just being facetious. But the reality is that how we've gotten here is because of the church, and how liberal that they were becoming from the 1960s on to now. So to me, it's just been a graduated sanction. It's graduating to being, so we won't call this a sin because we do it, or we won't deny you that pleasure because of grace. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it. It's been rampant in the church forever in the Christian circles.
Yeah, just kind of speaking on all that, I'm kind of blown away by how I haven't heard more pastors and different like Christian leaders kind of speaking out on everything that's gone down with Roe v. Wade, right? I was really impressed to hear. I know that was on Robbie's channel. He played Pastor Mark Driscoll's sermon on that. And I mean, that was such a powerful sermon, and just so to the point of like something that we need to hear from other Christian leaders, like talking about some of these things that are going on currently in our society. I'm just not hearing it from anybody else. In a lot of churches, a lot of, I'm not singling anybody out specifically, but I think you guys all know or are probably aware of different pastors or churches that are just silent on it. And it's just, I feel like as a Christian, we should be able to go to those sources to be able to hear that, rather than having to run to the mainstream media or wherever you get your news from to get some type of information on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to be honest. The first preacher that I have heard speak on any of this was Driscoll. And to me, that was like weird, because this is a prevalent thing. And I'm surprised we didn't see more pastors going towards the Roe v. Wade stuff. And honestly, I mean, we talk about music. I saw more things being talked about in the music field about how this is ending women's rights, and this is, just shutting it down for women, instead of being like, well, one, our Constitution's intact, at least for one issue, and then, we're saving babies' lives.
Well, let's go ahead and do this real quick. Let's go ahead and put on, the woke Christian mindset. How do they justify biblical matters with the killing of a child, right? Let's start there, right? Because we're not talking about the world, we're not talking about atheists, we're talking about people who claim to be Christians. And so what is that justification? Robbie, what do you think that justification is for.
Well, if you haven't heard my rant on my last radio show, I have it up on my YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/celebrate truth, you'll see it there. But it says Robbie rants about abortion, and you can watch the presentation that Mark Driscoll does. But in the second hour, I go off for the entire hour. You heard it, Elijah. And I just kind of break it all down, what's going on. But one of the elements is it's kind of an invisible thing. You can't really see it. It's not like right out in the open where people, it's like back in the day when people would see these starving children in Africa and they would just turn the channel. You know what I mean? Their conscience didn't want to know exactly what's going on. I don't think a lot of people really know even what goes on in an abortion. I don't think they've actually seen the procedure and all these. So not minimizing it, but saying the fact that a lot of times the worldliness of just everything to do with that we're involved in, it becomes predominantly what people will focus on. And like you said, how can people, we've had this argument before when we talk about like, how can people not see Genesis the way it is? We have to understand though, there's certain things that are so much more crucial than if someone gets Genesis 100% correct based on that interpretation. So for me, I'm like, look, when it comes down to churches, and I agree, there's always been problems with the churches, and I'm not going to come on and we'll start bashing the church and it's the excuse to stop going to church. I think it's so important that there are people that are in the churches and you find those good churches. But for example, you were mentioning Mark Driscoll, but like John MacArthur, I mean, he stood up hardcore to the California government and all these sort of things. My pastor in Edmonton, I mean, he went to jail. Now we don't agree with everything, but I'll tell you one thing. I've seen more godliness in that man than a lot of stuff that's going on. They'll have, when the Roe v. Wade happened, there was absolute applause in the church based on the fact that it was a victory. It was a miracle of God that took place. Like, that's the whole thing. And I said this to a lot of people. That happened in 72. I was born in 72. Okay. Roe v. Wade was put into place. I never thought in my lifetime, nor my children's lifetime, would I ever see that being overturned. Okay. That's the way it was going to be. So we have to understand that is a miraculous event that took place, in the States, that God is moving with all this corruption, all this wokeness is going on. There's a lot of good stuff that's happening. But I would say that right now it starts off the slippery slope. You start off with one little degree and then you go further and further and further. And pretty soon, all of a sudden, now you're into advocating like abortion up to 9 months. And you're like, what's going on? Everyone has to have that wake up call. And maybe it's going to take a certain element to get to that point for these people. I'm not sure. It's a hard question, say, but I'll tell you one thing. I'm at a point now where I'm like, look, I don't believe personally that someone truly understands biblical Christianity or believes that they're truly following God and that are fine with killing babies in the womb, period. Now, whether they're doing it personally or they're standing in support of that, they're baby killers, period. I'm not saying we have to hate them, but understand they're baby killers and we've got to pray for them. We got to love on them or whatever, but that's where they identify as. So for example, if I knew an artist, and let's say Toby Mac just came out and he was all pro abortion, how can I continue supporting listening to an artist if they're a baby killer? That's where I'm at now. And then maybe it's taking this culture to wake up a lot of people on both sides to go, wait a minute, we're now at a point now where people just can't sit on the fence anymore. And for a long time, guys, Christians been able to sit on the fence for a lot of issues, but I'm telling you right now, over the next 5 to 10 years, not a chance. So it's just the way God's weeding everything out. And there's the remnant, there's the true, the false, and you'll see what happens. But it's unbelievable to me, the escalation of everything that is happening in our world.
Go ahead, Doug. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I mean, for years we've seen the decline of not only Western civilization, but we've seen the decline of Christ in anything and everything.
So what is the justification though, right? So somebody who claims Christ, right? And let's say Christ is being removed. What obviously we know there's gonna, it's gonna be degraded at that moment. But what is that justification? How does, let's talk real quickly, as an example, Pastor Warnock, and a lot of people in conservative circles call him Warlock, who won a seat in Georgia, and he's running for re-election. And Lecrae, campaigned for him, and he was a pro-choice pastor. So what is that justification then? That somebody can actually be Christian and pro-choice in the same breath. What do you think?
There is no justification.
Well, how do they do it? How do you think they do
God
it?
loves everyone. God loves everyone, and everything's okay. You just have to say, like,
Yeah, Rob, you're going off at the same time.
go ahead, Doug, go.
I'm just going to say they intertwine false doctrine and theology with biblical scriptures that don't mean what they actually mean. I mean, it's just straight up heresy. Sorry, Robbie.
No, it's okay.
Elijah, what would you say to that?
Just as far as the justification.
Yeah, how do you? I mean, you've been around. Maybe maybe you know some people at church, somebody who, they're pro. Because look, I mean, we're going to read an article that talks about 77%. And I know that's a little skewed. I've showed there's different stats and different numbers, but it is the overwhelming majority. You could put those numbers around 60% that evangelical Christians believe in some form of abortion being legal, whether that's incest, rape, in these extreme instances, they believe in those. What pushes, because we're not talking about a small group here, right? We're talking about, in this regards, these would be considered woke Christians amongst people who would be, hey, we're going to stand on the word of God, we're going to preserve life, and we're going to believe in these measures of sanctity of life, right? And we're starting to see that overwhelming, especially with the youth coming in, being much more pro-choice in their stance. Can we even say, is there anything that we can think of is a justification?
Yeah, I don't even know how you can justify it. And I would really love to hear somebody, like, especially, specifically a Christian, follower of Christ who, reads and understands the Bible, try to justify that, because I would be amazed to see how they try to do that. I mean, for me, I think that sometimes you have a lot of these like lukewarm Christians that, they want to be accepted by the church, but then they also, and they're Christian friends, but then they also want to be accepted by their secular friends in the world. And, in some of these areas that, you need to draw a line in the sand, like with abortion, I feel like sometimes people just kind of brush to the side. It's easier just to not say anything sometimes, right? Rather than, losing a bunch of friends, or maybe it's a pastor who doesn't want to say anything in front of the congregation because he's worried about losing, a third or half of the congregation because people are upset and walk out, and I'm not coming back because he's getting political and blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of people just justify it by not saying anything at all, right? Mm-hmm. And which isn't right either, obviously, but.
Well, I think what they do, and this is my opinion on it, is I think that they use falsified statistics, right? We get this talking point that Roe versus Wade was overturned, and we're getting this talking point that thousands and thousands of women are going to die because they won't have access to safe, legal abortions. And yet the statistic, even on Planned Parenthood website, reveals that it was well under 100 people the year before Roe versus Wade died of illegal abortions. Those back alleys, those supposedly back alley. They make this big claim that it's going to be these, thousands and tens of thousands, hundred thousands of people, millions. You actually hear them say millions of women are going to die. Kamala Harris. They're saying these things, right? So as a Christian, you hear this and you go, well, of course I don't want women to die, and so you start to believe false narratives and false statistics. Robbie, why don't you share with everybody what actually happened with Roe versus Wade? And does this mean that illegals are, abortions are illegal all across the country?
No, it's so crazy. These people are just going absolutely insane. And really, this is like the best possible thing that could happen. The Supreme Court, unelected officials, said, we believe that the people should decide, not 6 guys or 9 guys or whatever, that the people should decide. We're going to give the power back to the states. Therefore, if you're in a blue state, nothing changes. Red state, it might change. But most of these people that are going absolutely insane, Nothing changes for them. But again, now we're starting to see the real divided states of America start to form, where all of a sudden now you got people like absolutely not, like Oklahoma made it illegal 100%, right? Then you got other states like Colorado that are allowing it up to 9 months. You're about to see, and I've said this, you're about to see abortions performed after babies are born in the next 2 to 3 years. It's going to happen. You're going to see the sick, twisted perversion of the left go so extreme, while the right is going to go that area. So what I'm saying is, it's like God is forcing everyone to like pick that side, and you've chosen. It's like, I'm not going to get into the mark or nothing, but I'm saying you're kind of marked. This is where your territory you've chosen. Because what's interesting about what's happening in the States, and I believe there's a very spiritual blessing upon the States, and we don't need to go into all the evil and everything that America has done. Yes, it has. But there's been this special blessing upon America. I strongly believe that. And we're seeing this happen, play out right before our eyes. So to me, it's going to be extraordinary what we see. But this happening right now, guys, they're talking about this happening again to gay marriage, where the Supreme Court's going to say, we shouldn't have ruled on this. We're giving it to the people to decide. What do you think is going to happen then? You think they're going crazy now? Guess what happens when all of a sudden they start making gay marriage illegal? And it's probably coming as well. But the fact that if people were just educated and understood, look, they're letting the people decide. And if half the country doesn't want it, then why should they have to have it? Right? The whole idea with America, which is really unique from any other country in the world, is it's not a democracy. It's a republic, right? You got Republicans and you got Democrats. And it came to me the other day, and I don't know if this is just a normal thing in America, but I'm like, oh, Republicans, Republic, Democrats, they're fighting for democracy, right? They're always like, they're coming after our democracy. They're trying to attack our democracy. And I'm like, but America's not a democracy. They want to impose this. Satan wants to impose his system. And what I'm saying is you're seeing a spiritual war play out like we've never seen in our life. To me, it's extraordinary what's playing out over the next 10 years.
Well, I mean, preparing for the show, one of the scriptures that really spoke to me was Revelations 12:7-10, and it talks about it. It's really weird how we are maneuvering now into where you're starting to see the separation, the true separation of where do you actually stand and who do you actually stand with. Either you stand with God or you stand with man. And it's dividing churches, it's dividing families, it's dividing cultures. And, you know, I'm seeing it play out on the streets every weekend that I've been working my other job. But the thing to me is that we've all talked about and have thought about how does this happen? How does the great falling away happen? How does all of that stuff take place where it was prophesied within the Bible? And granted, we grew up with the Thief in the Night videos and stuff like that scared us, as little children, but we are seeing it now play out, and it's almost a calming effect on me, knowing that this wasn't all for naught. So I think there's that part of the Christian realm that's seeing that and ready to go fight. But again, hey, Elijah, I was thinking about you when we were bringing this topic up, because you went to Mars Hill, and there was no more divided area than the West and the Northwest, for that matter. What was it that you saw there with all of this stuff?
Yeah, I was back there. I was in Seattle from 2012 to 2016, and went to Mars Hill. Most of the time I was there until it fell apart, obviously. I've never been to a church where like weekly you're pulling into the parking lot and you have people protesting and picketing outside of the church. And this was really, before he got into, he always said some controversial stuff, but much more towards the end, I think he got more vocal about it. But there's, they had to have security guards kind of roaming in our lobby because there would be people that would come in and pose as like church members, you know, kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing type of thing, and come in there and start like spreading all kinds of lies and gossip and rumors and all kinds of stuff, just doing all these little things to attack the church however they could. And then like all the media there, just, it was constantly attack after attack on Mars Hill. You know, and Seattle at one time was the least church city in the country. And, you know, I don't know where that's at now after that church fell apart, but yeah, it was so weird as far as like, you know, when you're talking about like a dividing line, being in a city that was so far to the left, and there was just so much of, you know, progressivism and all that there. And then to have like this church that kind of stood as a beacon there and like was, you know, very vocal against that, and just kind of got hammered over and over and over again until I mean, I think there were other things obviously that went on at the church there, but I think that there were just a lot of people that were trying to take that church down, to the point that even after they ran Mark out of the church, he was in the backyard with his family and they were throwing stones at him and his kids, you know, that wow. He basically had to leave and move out of the state. You know, I mean, you know, where do you hear about that kind of stuff at, you know?
It's crazy.
Yeah. Crazy. And, you know, when this happened, you know, Elijah texted me and he said, "Can you believe what just happened?" Something of that nature. And he's like, "Prepare for the riots." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" It was like a Friday morning or something. And, you know, I was we were at my parents' house and I had no clue what happened. You know, because this did come out of, you know, we were teased this was going to come because of that leak. Do you guys think that this was because we never thought this was going to happen in our lifetime? Do you guys think this was a planned part of division, something planned to divide us, even more so during this very political climate that we're in?
I guess in ways you talk about it all the time. If your eschatology was like, hey, we're in the end times, and you'd be like, you talk about it, you warn people about it, but I don't think you computed that you could actually be that close to it. Even though I'm not there myself personally, I think we do have multiple generations left. I'm just looking at the fact of, look at these warning signs and how fast things can escalate, right? But I remember doing youth ministry back when I first got saved, 94, 93. And I was talking to the youth and I was letting them know, I said, I really believe this very strongly, that you're going to see not only bestiality, but you're going to see pedophilia completely normalized in society. And they were like, no, that's crazy. That's crazy. And I remember saying this all the time through my ministries. I just had a feeling that once you open Pandora's box, it just is a slippery slope. And that's the ultimate goal. And we can talk a bit about that and it's fine. But that's another issue that I think is really pressing, that is starting to wake up a lot of people. It's like God's almost using a certain thing where it's like, no, that doesn't wake you up. That doesn't wake. What about your children? Right. And a lot of parents, and we'll talk a bit about that because I think there's some hope that some people are going, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa. It's got to a point now where they're like, maybe I should reflect on how far I've slid down this hill when I was so close in my walk with God. And all of a sudden I looked up, and that's happened to me in my walk where all of a sudden God would wake me up and I'd be like, wow, like I've drifted quite far. Like, and I didn't even know it at the time. And I'm not saying I was way into sin and all this, but I had strayed. I see this happening with a lot that's going on in our society, but to do with the end times, about the division. We all knew that there'd be this remnant, right? That it would be this really tough time. I think through the entire lockdowns that we all went through, we now can experience what it's like when the entire world in a blink of an eye can turn against you. Neighbors can rat on you. They can fire you. They can say, you're no longer part of our society. That to me is a warning sign. That's not Christian persecution, because my Muslim neighbor, he got just as persecuted if he wasn't going to do something, right? What the government told him to. But I'm saying that should be a wake-up call and a chilling reminder to Christians as what's prophesied and what's to come, where it will be directed towards one group. So I think it's very important that we're strengthened, we're alert in these times, and we don't take for granted in this time where all of a sudden, hey, we're a little bit more freedom right now. Guys, they can come right back. And already they're starting to move directions. And I'm saying we got to get a little bit vocal. I was a little disappointed. Forget just the church. Where were the patriots? Where were Americans standing up against their rights? when all these rights were taken away. So I don't think, and I remember talking to my pastor and he said the same thing. He goes, just like the war with scientism, and I said this to you many times, Chris, I found it incredibly interesting how God created this massive army behind me that weren't really even believing in him yet, but they were fighting the Satanist lies of scientism. They were coming against the evolutionists. They were coming against all these people that were destroying the credibility of the Bible, and they weren't even believers yet. The same thing is going to happen with this war that's coming. It won't just be Christians. There'll be a ton of other people that will say, no, we're standing on this side. They're moving that direction. They don't even know it yet. That's, to me, what's so powerful. And every day I'm online, I see more people distrusting science. And I know this is a little segue, but I'm so encouraged why so many people are starting to go, wait a minute, my entire foundation was built on science. Guys, we're talking about the Bible or science. It's that easy, right? When science crumbles, what do you have left? Like, there's a huge awakening, a huge revival that's taking place, but it's in this really dire circumstances that are taking place in our world. But to me, it is unbelievable. If something doesn't break or some people don't wake up, I don't know how far this is going to go. But how far has it gone in the last 3 years?
Yeah. Robbie, if you want to give maybe the audience that doesn't know, maybe a little short teaser of what you actually have working on next.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm working on my second book. That is something I'm putting together and just kind of tentatively call Remember What They Did in the Name of Science. I'm going to be going through everything from where my first book went into NASA and evolution and all the lies based on our creation and origins. I'm going to be in the second book getting into everything that all of us have gone through. Everything to do with food, to do with chemtrails, to do with, the list goes on and on. Use your imagination. But that is something I'm compiling right now, starting to write it. I'm really excited about releasing that because I just think it's so important, because so many people just in that walk of, when I came out with Scientism Exposed, even those documentaries and even the book for that matter, it didn't even mention that controversial topic that would turn people away. Oh, heaven forbid someone say flat earth, but it doesn't even mention that. And it was a way to get people kind of involved. And so many people have come and said, look, man, there's so many problems with scientism. And I just had a talk at the church the other day about someone and said, hey, man, look what they've said to you in the name of science. Yeah, man. People are receptive and they're open to say, wait a minute, if science lied here, here, and here, maybe they've lied more places. Where do I find my truth? And it comes back to the Bible over and over again. And that's not just for your origins and for the creation. That comes to morality. That comes for our life and our living. And I think all of it comes down to, we're in a war of good and evil, right and wrong, period. That's it. We're literally looking at good and evil take place right before our eyes. And people are starting to wake up and saying, this is straight evil. I've heard people even comment and saying, hey, man, I don't know, but this looks pretty demonic. And I don't even know if I believe in that. This is really heinous, really wicked stuff that's coming. And I think it's all part of that design to possibly wake up enough people to feel ashamed to go, never let this happen again. It could be a major just wake up call, one last, never let this happen again, a reminder. And hopefully we pass this on generation to generation. Say, it is so important you understand this is where it's going to go, right? When they were warning about Elvis shaking his hips, that it's going to lead to this debauchery in music, we really put the brakes on and we put the safeguards on. I don't know, but all I'm saying is we now know the progression of what can take place within a very short span of time if we do have multiple generations left. If we don't, then we don't. But I still believe that we're about to see some major things take place. It's going to get very, very interesting in America, especially. But these world orders that are clashing with one another, the liberal, progressive, woke New World Order, and there's an entire kind of traditional family New World Order. It's really bizarre what's taking place, but you've got two factions that are fighting. But there's a lot of countries right now, they're like, we don't want any of this. We don't want the trans agenda. We don't want this abortion. They were trying to push abortion in Africa, and the Africans didn't want it. Bill Gates and the Melinda, with their foundation. This is a sick, twisted, satanic agenda. They're trying to get all these countries. But guys, there's so many countries that are on board. So we're not right at the end yet. If you're thinking that we only got 2 or 3 years left.
The whole scientism stuff, they shot themselves in the foot just with COVID. And that's, I agree.
It couldn't have been better. It couldn't have been better. You couldn't find more proof to wake up more people on the lies of scientism than what happened in the last 2 years. I'm telling you right now, it is like, I'm looking at it everywhere and people are just like, I'm done with that. I'm done with scientists. I'm done with the experts. Great. If you're done with the experts and the so-called scholars of our world, people are about to get spiritual, good and bad. But the fact is, people are going to come back to spirituality a lot stronger. And that's where the church and where the body needs to be, and needs to show them the truth, the way, and the life, which is only found in one, period. And that's what I'm saying is we're to be that in this world, as disturbing and as crazy as it is. And if we have children, this whole idea like, wow, we only have 5 years, I don't have to worry about my children. What if we have multiple generations left? It's more important for us to have children and to impart with them, once we're gone, they're the ones that are going to take over. It's so important. I think part of Satan's lie is like, well, why would you do anything? Jesus is coming back in the next 2 years, right? I'm just saying we have to look at all facets, not just we only have 5 years in the end times and the rapture or whatever. What if there's multiple generations? What if there's a story to play out where we're going to be telling this for generations to come about what we witnessed and what we went through? And my book is going to be part of that, showing exactly what took place and a warning to people that no matter whoever reads that in the future, never let this happen. This is exactly what they did in the name of science, because I believe they're going to bring the intellect, and technology into play again. And it's going to be a big warning to people. So I'm just completely ramped up, man. I was just like on all these websites today, and I was just like, I can't believe how crazy it's getting. Like, it's just story after story. I was about to call Chris today and just like rant for like 2 hours, because I'm like, it is overload today. I mean, monkeypox and this and this and it's just like, oh my goodness, they're admitting all these things, and you're kind of like, what is going on?
So on that, I love listening to you, Robbie. So the whole monkeypox thing, they're like trying to jam it down your throat. And I heard a guy talking to somebody on the radio from the Cleveland Clinic, the world-renowned Cleveland Clinic, and he asked him a straight-up a question that was, isn't monkeypox really that of to be feared by the homosexuality?
It's open. Don't worry about it. It's literally articles. You can type it in right now on Google, and they actually came out today. The CDC director said that there were children that just came down with monkeypox, and guess where they got it from? Gay communities. She actually announced this, right? I'm like, is this for real? I can't even figure the angle on this one. I'm blown away at the fact that they're literally article after article after article are saying it's coming from gay communities. They're warning the LGBT. If you go to the New York vaccine site or whatever, it says, hey, here's the conditions to get your vaccine, because they have a monkeypox vaccine or something already or something. And one of the requirements is that you're part of the LGBT. And I'm like, am I dreaming? Like, what is going on? This world is getting so crazy and so bizarre. But I think when people lose their identity and they lose that foundation and they have no sense of being or worth, or they understand everything we're going to see crazy stuff where we're like, how can people not see this? But guys, they're blinded. They're absolutely lost. We need to have compassion. We need to be like Jesus, where he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They don't know what they're doing. That's the reality. Now, there's some people that maybe do, and they're in the high levels, but the majority of people have no clue, man. They are so blinded by the God of this world. These are the things that we have to, we can be angry, but also we have to pray that God will give us that heart and understanding, and we'll at least be able to pray for them and saying, like, they need us. We're the ones. It takes us to pray. Sodom and Gomorrah is prime example. Find me one. Remember? But he was willing to like save Sodom and Gomorrah if he could just find that one. But God was willing to do that. So we need to be like that. Like, is there good people? Is there people out there that are awake? But they will be woken up through us. God working through us, right? We're the mouthpieces. We're the ones that have to go out in truth. And the big topic we had before about the seeker sensitive thing is they went too far on that. Well, let's just be nice and embrace everyone. We'll accept you. God will accept you just the way you are. Wrong. Where does it say that in the Bible, right? We've got to be a little bit more, polarizing, but people are ready for it. They're ready for the hard talk, because they're like, I had all this hard talk with the experts in science. Now I want to know the facts. People are ready. They're hungry right now, and I've seen this. When I started in 2015 with this whole exposing scientism, I never thought it would lead to a point like you had mentioned, where an event would take place that would wake up and like more people than all the combination of work that we've all done in all our respective ministries, Literally, that one event would wake that many people. Parents are waking up left, right, and center. Homeschooling is going through the roof. There is some amazing stuff taking place. And America, like I said, the divided states of America that's forming right now, it's playing out right before our eyes. And it's like, it's no laughing matter. It's a serious thing, but it's also a time thing. There's going to be time. I mean, what do you think is going to happen after you have all these states on either side? Eventually they go to war, right? That's just what usually happens, but it plays out over a long period of time. But whether it's national divorce or whether you go to like a civil war scenario, I think that's way off in the distance. But I think we're about to see some radical stuff play out in the world. And I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk for Agenda 2030. They're going to have us all eating bugs and not owning personal property. They have their timeline. God has his, period.
Elijah, you got anything on that? Well, come on, bring it now. Hey, by the way, hold on. Everybody in the chat, Robbie's a little under the weather, and you couldn't tell a beat. So he's passionate about it, and
I'm passionate. I told Chris, I said, if you're going to bring up this topic, like I'm going to go off.
All right, hold on. All right, Elijah, go ahead.
Where to start? I completely agree. I think that, you're starting to see this division take place where, it's, like scripture says, choose you this day whom you will serve, right? And I think we're going to get into that in a little bit here as far as with some Christian music talk, but are you for the LGBT community or not? Are you for pro-choice or pro-life, right? Like there's all these different hot topics and stuff like that, social topics that I think for a long time people have been able to kind of skirt the issue, not talk about it, avoid it, as much as they can. But I think they're with artists and stuff like that, you're going to start seeing people say like, make your opinion known publicly, I think that obviously goes to the greater thing of what's going on in the country, which is, they're trying to divide, continue to divide on certain topics, right? It's one thing or the other, with the past 2 years and everything. Are you wearing a mask or not? Are you, Republican and Democrat, they're always making us choose these, it's ones and zeros trying to make us choose a side, right? So I think that you're going to continue to see that. I think that's part of maybe like we were talking about with the agenda with all of this, with Roe v. Wade, that maybe it's just a continuation of that agenda of just trying to divide us, right? And trying to separate people out as well, right? Because like we talked about with, whether we're in the end, heading towards the end times, sooner, or, there's some time, that we may still have, like Robbie said, nonetheless, they're continuing to kind of like take the Christians and like pull them out of the general society and say, okay, all right, you hate us because of this, you hate us because of this, right? And continue to just segregate us away from the general population. It's a slow burn, but they're just continuing to do it over and over again. You see with all these different events that are happening.
Right. It's like how AOC, she refers to us as radical Christians, or she referred to the men who were on the panel, in the Supreme Court as these radical white males, right? So it's this small, it's viewed as this small population that is actually truly out there fighting and defending lives. Let's just do this really quickly. I think this would be great for the listener. I don't know if you guys ever play, like in your mind, how could we fix this right now? And we don't need to spend a lot of time each person, but what are some practical things? I'll start and you guys can finish. What are some practical things that we can do sort of to cross the aisle amongst the woke Christians? The world, I don't think there's going to be that bridge until he shows up, because he is that bridge, right? So where we're at with woke Christianity, biblical Christianity fighting for the sanctity of life, and woke Christianity saying, yeah, I'm probably pro-life in my life, but I'm pro-choice. And just before we move on that regards, you have all these woke Christians that, we probably won't spend a lot of time talking about this tonight, but they promoted Black Lives Matter. And with Black Lives Matter, it was all about saving Black lives, in specifically these unarmed men, Black men who were killed by white police officers or police officers. And at that time, we were dealing with around 9 unarmed Black men being shot in these instances, justifiably, unjustifiably. You go do the research on those. But when we talk about, we could talk about Chicago killing more, Black on Black crime to, the very essence of, the biggest population that abortion hits the hardest is the Black community, right? It's often said that if you're a Black woman in New York, you're more likely headed to the abortion clinic than to the hospital to give birth.
This 4-to-1 or something, like 5-to-1. It's highly proportional. Yeah,
it's so insane, and yet, we're talking about something that is causing less Black people to be here on earth. When we say a group is supporting less Black people on the earth, I will say to them, to everybody watching, that is racist. We do not believe in that. Conservatives are called racist, but yet somehow the pro-choice people are promoting less Black people. 1950, the Black population was around 10-12%. It's around 12 to 13% today. It's completely stagnated. It is being surpassed by Hispanics, Asians. The numbers are telling this story, and yet we're promoting everything that the eugenics program in this country was pushing, which was abolishing people of color. God, these are God's chosen people. Every race, every single race is a child of God, created in the womb. He knew you before you were, and he created you uniquely special. You have DNA that is unique to you. You are a child of God, and this is really the main issue with how do we fix this and bridge that gap. God is the author of life and death. Sadly enough, if incest, if rape comes in play, which make up such a very small, minute. Everybody thinks that if you get raped, you're going to get pregnant. You go ask a woman who's trying to get pregnant, who's having a hard time, they know they only ovulate a few days out of the month. It is very difficult in so many chances. And that's why when we have mistakes, because I have mistake children, that it was fully him who was allowing life to occur and to happen. And that's how it works, right? He is the author of life and death. He chooses who he has created in that womb. And we're sitting there as, I don't care if that child is in your body, you are not the author of life and death. You are not that author of death. So no matter what the situation is in these issues, I think that's the first thing to a woke Christian who is pro-choice in these matters, that it all falls back on him. It is all back to him, that he did this for a reason. He has a plan for that child, and you want to destroy that child, or you want the person to have that ability to destroy that child as somebody who would be a woke Christian. We start there. We remember these very simple biblical facts that can't be disputed. He is that author. We are not that author. That is scriptural, that is biblical. And, we often, you hear Candace Owens, you have people who talk about this, and they'll say, should the child be punished for the sins of the father? And that is a main argument from a conservative standpoint. The bigger issue, especially to woke Christianity, is, are you going to take the place of God and say that we have that ability to destroy a life that you created, that you formed in the womb, that you allowed this to happen? And that is the bigger issue right here, right? Sins of the father. Should we place the child and have the sins, of course, of somebody who did something horrific? Should we judge them on that? Of course not. But this is, I think, where we start. And I think I went a little too long, but you guys, if you have anything to add to that, of how we kind of cross that bridge and give really sound biblical advice to them without condemnation, without, tearing them apart for, their woke ideology.
Are we now like classifying abortion in the woke? Because like I would say for the longest time, we would just say it was immoral and it was wrong. To me, the woke is a little bit more crazy and out of,
Oh, no, I'm talking specifically woke Christianity, right? Because we're talking about something new.
So liberal Christianity?
Absolutely. Yeah,
okay.
Same
Sure.
thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine. All right. Yeah. Because there's moderate liberal and then there's wacky tobacco, right out left field.
So we're just talking about,
that's woke. To me, woke is just absolutely insane crazy.
Yeah, let's just talk about people who would consider themselves pro-choice Christian. Yeah,
I think on any of these issues you get to, I think it's very, very hard to justify, biblically. If you want to have your own justification or the God I believe in, and you want to make up your own imaginary God, hey, go for it. It's a free country, like they say, freedom of religion. Do what you want. But the fact is, it's not going to be biblical. You can't justify it biblical in the same regard when you're trying to bring up these things, like even the gay issue. Scripturally speaking, you just can't. Yeah. Liberal Christianity is an oxymoron, like Jason said. It's an impossibility. You got to break this down, but in its essence, yeah, it's kind of an impossibility, but you can't just openly say that to someone in their face. You're not going to have much ministering opportunities the minute you sit there and say, you're not a Christian. That's the worst thing when Christians get in arguments. It's like, you're not a Christian. It's like, where do you go from that? So you got to be careful. But having this discussion like this, we're all good with it. But if you came across someone like that, you couldn't just write them off and saying, I don't believe you're not Christian. Especially if they really believed in their heart there were. Like we talked about this before, Chris, you'd say like, hey, trying to get into their mindset. It's hard for all of us to get into the mindset. Like, how do they think? I don't know. We're not like blinded or we're not walking that way, but I don't know. Maybe they're on the very low end of the spectrum and God's still going to wake them up on their journey. Again, it's a very, very tough position to just discount them. There were a lot of people that got in when we were in, flat earth cosmology and all that, to dismiss someone based on the fact that they didn't have a proper understanding of the earth, that they might not be saved. And I spoke out against that, right? Very, very strongly. And I will continue to speak out on any kind of secondary issue, that divides kind of the church or Christians. And to be quite honest, in the war that we're in right now and looking at the articles we see every day, the last thing we need to do is be getting, tit for tat when it comes to Christians and their little doctrines and stuff. But when it comes to like morality, when it comes to life issues, when it comes to just blatant sin, that's where we've got to be strong.
See, I have gone for so long in my life and in my walk where you've tried to justify certain things. And it all comes back to me with 2 Timothy 3:12-13. Indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted, while evil people and imposters, now the word imposters is what we're talking about right now, will go on from bad to worse, deceiving and being deceived. I don't even know where this decline started, like where I started to notice it. But over the period of time, I just started listening to pastors talk. I listened to people talk within the church. And you saw, well, you can't, you got to be politically correct with this. You got to be politically correct with that. You can't, finally we got to a head during COVID and everything happened with the riots and everything, that I started seeing my good friends taking their pictures on Facebook or on Instagram and turning them black without any justification, without any real true knowledge to what was going on with BLM or why that started or what their tenets were versus actual scripture. Some people don't even know who Moloch is, and that the abortion topic has been raging on since the dawn of time. And it has nothing to do with anything but it's evil. It's Satanism.
It's child sacrifice. If you're in the essence of like you're saying, Doug, it's literally child sacrifice.
Yeah, it's worshiping Moloch. And if you don't know who that is, research it, read about it, and call me tomorrow. I don't care what you do.
But it's got like a medical veneer to it. It's got a scientific veneer. Like that's what I'm saying is they put these veneers on them for the world. The modern world sees these things as very scientific, very, very thought-provoking and very advanced. Like women continuing to get it, into their careers and move away from, the whole even idea of the roles in the family, husband and wife. Well, everything has been obliterated.
I get it at work every day, even to the sense that my wife's a stay-at-home mom. We have financial issues. We are lacking in the financial department, where I know a lot of us are. But I'm not willing to, at this point in my kids' lives and in our life, give that up, because I know, and I see it every day with the kids that I work with. You're trading something for something else, and sometimes that trade is not good. And so we did it in the church. We're trading one part of family values to make other people feel better about themselves, and not support, and it doesn't support scripture. And one of the things that drove me absolutely crazy were Christians that were all behind the BLM movement. Now, Black lives do matter, and we all agree on that. But what we don't agree on is the actual group that heads that up. And I saw it just this past weekend where BLM was protesting. I mean, Akron is somewhat on fire right now with protests because of a cop killing. You may not know that in the great up north, up in there in Canada. And it's just been crazy. And I saw older African Americans fight against the BLM movement. And to me, that was something that I was like, holy cow, I've never seen that. I haven't seen that in a long time. So therefore, I think there's a pushback, no matter even if it's abortion, Black Lives Matter, that there's now a pushback. I don't know any other way to be other than me, and how to approach somebody about it is to tell them, hey, you're wrong. If you agree with abortion, there's no way in this Bible that you can quote to me anything other than that it's evil and wrong.
Show them a procedure. Just say, give me 5 minutes. Let me show a video, and then we'll really discuss it afterwards. But have them watch a 5-minute video of the procedures that take place at whatever trimester you want. But the fact of the matter is, have them watch it. Just say, you have 5 minutes. Do you want to have this discussion? They say, yeah, go through it that way. Because a lot of people, they're just looking for this engaging. They need a visual. They need to see it. Understand that abortion is invisible. You don't see it, right? I said this on my show. And I mean, we all understand, yes, it's murder. When they see it actually happening in front of their eyes, trust me, that will change them. That will wake them up. Have a video on your phone ready to play when you're getting into that discussion, and say you're going to have a serious discussion. Have them watch it. Say, hey, I just want to watch a couple of things and let's have a discussion on it. Don't be controversial. But I agree, Doug. At the end of the day, it's no like playing Mr. Nice Guy. It is fine saying, I disagree. And by the way, I believe you're wrong. You don't have to hate someone. You don't have to not be friendly with someone. It's okay. Even us on the panel, we can disagree with one another. It's okay. We're so terrified now to offend people. It's like, what the heck's happened to us? It's like, be a man, stand up. If this is your conviction, stand up to it. I have more respect for someone that stands up to the convictions that rather does their lukewarm. Well, I don't know. Yeah, well, just be a man, stand up and do it. And it's all good. It's all good. But I agree with you, Doug. It's like, we're at a point now where you just have to actually tell the truth. And it's fine. Say truth and love, but be direct. And there it is. But I'm telling you, when it comes to abortion, if you're talking to a woman, you're talking to a guy, it doesn't matter. Have a clip on your phone, especially if you're having coffee or you're sitting down or that type of, engagement where they're kind of on the, well, what about this? There you go. Wouldn't it be better for them to take the child out? Here's another factor. They're getting into insane, like third trimester, like abortions and getting into infanticide after it's born. Why don't you just remove the baby? Do you know how many people want to adopt babies, for goodness sakes? You don't need to actually keep that baby. There's a lot of loving parents out there that would gladly have that baby. They have this mentality that's like, well, I got to keep that baby for life. No, you don't. There are options, but killing it is one that you want to actually not have on the table at all. But they don't look at it that way. It started off as a fetus and it started as a clump of cells. But guess what, guys? We're not at a point. Nobody's really talking about clump of cells and fetuses anymore. They're talking about woman's choice.
Yep.
Like we've escalated to a point where we're not having that discussion anymore. Roe v. Wade had limits, had safeguards. Roe v. Wade had like, hey, within this time span, but everyone agreed with Roe v. Wade that you're not going to have it in the second and third. Guys, we're in the third trimester and infanticide now, okay? We've flipped the scales. If we went back to Roe v. Wade and put that in place, it would be better than what's the insanity that's coming our way in the blue states.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah, I'll kind of beat up on my generation a little bit, being a millennial. Like, I know specifically with a lot of like, Christian millennials that I know right now, there's just so much like wishy-washiness there. People that don't really want to stand for the truth, stand for something, right? And I think that's really what we need more of, especially with my generation, is we need people that are, men and women that are going to stand up for truth, stand up, stand on something firm, right? Don't just kind of go with where, whatever direction the wind is blowing that day because you're worried about offending somebody or, it's, you got to put a black out your Instagram or whatever to try to get some acceptance from people. But I'm trying to remember. I was sitting here trying to remember that statistic that Mark Driscoll had. Maybe Robbie will remember it when like a woman goes in to have an abortion.
Yeah.
And there's a man. The man goes with her. And
if the man says, "Let's keep this baby,"
right,
85% of women will say, "Okay." They want the man to lead. They've done the studies, and if a man says, "I'm here, let's have this child together," it's all about that. And God knew that all along, that children were supposed to be inside marriage, right? It was all about that. Look at what has actually happened when people say, hey, I don't need God. I'm going to do it my way, right? I'm going to do my own thing. It's nothing but disaster and pain and horror and an absolute clown world that we're living in right now. It is going so off the rails and so insane, but that is the level of debauchery. That's the level of absolute insanity that we're about to witness. And guys, we haven't even seen the worst of it. Like, we're thinking like, hey, how could it get any crazier? You wake up the next morning and you're like, okay, that just topped it. I didn't think that yesterday could top. That one just did. Like, it is escalating at such a rapid pace. And I think it's something where God is allowing it to happen so that it will literally wake up people. It's going too fast, guys. Like, it's going too fast. Something's up. And also with the Roe v. Wade and also these things that are starting to play out in the States, I'm like, it's not yet time. God's showing mercy. He's showing grace, and there's still time. But he's calling the church and Christians, his ambassadors, to go out and be bold because he's behind them every step of the way. And that's what we have to understand. Why do we fear man? We all do. We all do to some degree. We're sitting here right now. We're fearing YouTube, right? The fact of the matter is, it is true, right? But we'll use the platforms. Again, it's their platform. We'll use it based on their rules.
I needed to black out my face for this conversation because I'm a government worker.
Well, the point is that it's we're at that stage, and I don't think a lot of people, especially America, would have seen, hey, if I had said like 20 years ago, America's gonna be taken over by communists in the next 2 decades, you'd be like, oh, no. Silly Robbie, Canadian, doesn't know anything about the States. It's crazy to think that communists, Marxists have literally taken over America. As it stands right now, it is taken over, right? And it's like God is the one that's fully operating in this thing. And it's almost like if people wake up, go back to that verse in Isaiah, right? If my people will humble themselves and repent and turn from their wicked ways, I will heal their land. Honestly, guys, there is enough faithful believers, even if it's a small remnant. Keep in mind, there's enough people in the States that it can turn around. It truly can.
So,
hold on, let Elijah finish up.
Oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
I'll just say real quick. Have you guys ever read?
Somewhere? You were going somewhere. Don't.
Yeah, just butt in. Just butt in. Yeah, it's all good.
Go.
Have you ever read the book The Unseen Hand by Ralph Epperson?
No.
Okay, that was a book I read many years ago. Really good book. Highly recommend it. It's super thick, but it's an awesome read. He talked a lot about like the hidden communist agenda that's kind of sprinkled through society. And he wrote this book many, many years ago. I remember reading the book like back when like the hot topic was terrorism, right? Back in like the 9/11 days and stuff. And I'm sitting there reading and thinking like, this guy's, he's got some good stuff in his book, but I think he's a little bit off. I think communism's kind of dead. And
hold on. You said 9/11?
Yeah.
Don't you mean January 6th?
Yeah, that's the new 9/11.
Yeah. Go, continue. Go ahead.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that was the worst armed insurrection in America's soil in the history of America. Guys, don't trivialize that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Elijah.
Yeah. So I just remember reading that and thinking like, this guy's crazy. Like communism's dead. That's never coming back around. That's in some crazy corners of the world.
Yeah.
But then to see it like like I said, when I was in Seattle and you're seeing like they had like elected officials that were socialists there. And I'm like, what in the world is going on?
Back to BLM. BLM are open Marxists calling for the destruction of the nuclear family. They literally are bringing in LGBT. Like it is so right in your face. And you're like, look at the power. Corporations are flying their flags. And you're kind of like, this is a spiritual war. How does a small minority that tiny, right, get that much power? That is a spiritual force like you've never seen. It's almost like you don't underestimate it, but you also have to understand that like God's like, look, man, I can take this away in 3 seconds. Do you not understand exactly how important it is that you're faithful and devoted to me? I'm telling you, even the most devout Christian in America has backslidden to some degree. They've got lukewarm. They've got comfortable in their lifestyle, right? All I'm saying is 40 years seems to be the thing he likes a lot of times to like basically, and these people that say, oh, God's going to bring judgment to America. Guys, this is judgment. If you don't understand that what's happening right now, judgment just hasn't come to everyone. It's now coming to the children. That it should be a wake-up call that it's coming to the children. And if you read the Bible very clearly, it says that the punishment and some judgment comes to the children. Notice that the children now are coming under this judgment. This is a serious place that we're in right now. God's judgment is already here. I'm not saying God's wrath is here. I'm saying God's judgment is here, right? I've said this for a very long time. Even at the beginning of COVID, I said something is about to happen. Some shift is taking place, and it's almost like this huge wake-up call. But I have seen things in the last couple of years where I'm like, wait a minute, something else is happening on a spiritual front that is bigger than most people understand. Roe v. Wade is massive. It's a very, very big thing. Just to understand that, like, 17 states are going to be like, no abortion here. Do you know how many millions of babies that is going to prevent from being killed and slaughtered? It's unbelievable what's happening. So there is this war going on. And ultimately, we have to understand that greater is he that is in us than he was in the world, right? This whole idea of being ambassadors for him, we have to take it very seriously and be strong and be courageous. But it's no time to be like, hey, I'm going to be seeker sensitive and I'm going to be, if you're at a church like that, you call it out or you find one or you do one yourself. But at the end of the day, you've got to be around likewise people because neighbors are going to be like ratting on you here soon and stuff. Like you've got to find people with the same beliefs, it is so important to have that fellowship, to worship, to come together. All that stuff is so important. Most times when people leave churches, this is the common denominator I see all the time. Their spiritual life goes down the drain. They stop worshiping, they stop fellowshipping. A lot of stuff takes place. If that is going on, find a church. I am always going to advocate for church all throughout my ministry, because don't dismiss it. It is a tool of the devil, because he knows 99% of the time it is going to affect your spiritual life, and you're going to actually, your prayer life is going to be diminished. Your all these things are not going to go as planned. It's so important to at least be with the church. That is important.
We got to the first hour. We're a little bit over. So we're going to come back to this topic. Elijah, let's wrap this up in 30 seconds, and then we're going to be done with topic 1, and then we're going to be heading right into topic 2. So
how many topics do we have? I didn't get
two topics. We got 2 topics.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So go ahead, Elijah.
No, I said what I had to say.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick. So everybody on the panel, Elijah, go ahead, get the article ready to go. We're going to start hour 2. Go ahead, take a quick break. I'm going to share my screen here really quickly. While we do that, I'm going to play the first part of a song, because we are a music show. So I just wanted to make sure we did something musically here. And give me 1 second. Let me go ahead and pull this up so people can see the lyrics on the screen. And I don't think I'm going to get banned for this one, which is all good. And while we're getting ready, we're going to start with this. This is by Can't Have My Soul. This is Jacob. So enjoy while we wait for this to happen.
Tell her how it is. I'm gonna tell him how it is. Gonna tell him how it is. Gonna tell him how it is. This world's going crazy. How the heck we debating killing babies? And I hope I piss a lot of people off. Defend it how you like, but you still killing babies. Twisted, that's what the devil does. Inch by inch, we take it how it comes. That ain't religion talking, that's real life. That's a double-edged sword, yeah, real knife. And we sick to the bone. Detox now, gotta kill what I become. Habits, gotta beat them like a drum. Addicts, gotta turn around and run. That is the only way you gon' make it. Cause they feed it to the world, don't mean you gotta take it. This fast food generation got young bloods tripping. Eyes wide shut, they ain't catching me slipping. You can have my soul. 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 Hey, I said the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. So every day I wake up, I try and stay asleep. Don't ever get it twisted, I don't mean Z's. I told you on my last record, Jesus is my dream. Some sweet dreams, and good night. And rest in weary bones for the good fight. We got wicked hearts, and the flesh fails. Ever heard a little term called sex sales? Now we got 40 million people watching porno. Didn't happen overnight, that was slow-mo. They gave them just a little bit, kept coming back. They increased the dosage, similar to crack. And a lonely child, stuck in the hood. Hanging with brothers is something no good. So watch and pray, like all day. A temptation gon' shake you up the hard way. You can have my soul. 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 Last verse going in, hey, open up the window.
Good song, man.
Got a mask and wear the endo. I don't need no endo. I don't need no Patron. Gotta keep it clean. This is God's second home. Yeah, this is God's second home. And every line I spit, he's right there with me in the zone. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. Sit around and wait and you will get to know a dumb you. Yeah, he's the master of the skies. Take the truth, bend it just a little bit into the lies. That's his forte. Start with foreplay. Started smoking weed once a month, now it's all day. Now we stay high while he ride the beat. Brain on vacation, dirty mouth working overtime. And I'm out of time, and I'm done rapping. I ain't nobody special, dude, no clapping. You can't have my soul. Yeah, you can't have my soul.
Good song, man.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was
Yeah.
That was
I don't think I heard that one before.
Yeah, that's kind of lyrics that you could accept 10 years ago because that was written in 2012. And the artists don't put out stuff like that today, where they're actually very clear cut on what is happening, what's going on, and right to real issues. So we're going to jump into this next topic. I'm going to put this up on the screen as well. So give me a second, and Elijah's going to read, and then we could stop him. So if you want to just stop him, and feel free to just stop him and say something. So let me go ahead and get this in the screen, and I'll set it up before he does this. And I thought this was something really good for us to share. Okay. Since we are a music show, and so this has to deal with everything that's going on. This was a Vice article that was written and published on July 14th, just a few days ago, like last week or so.
Keep in mind, Vice did a few pieces on certain events that I put on and different things in different communities. So I wouldn't put too much weight into.
For sure. But no, this is exactly everything that I was going to show.
They hate Christianity. They actually hate Christianity. Vice does.
Right. But this is dealing with exactly, as we'll see in this article, this was in this topic that we're going to be talking about next, this woke Christian ideology. And so, go ahead and let's go ahead and just read this and see what this thing has to say. Go for it, Elijah.
Okay. Christian rock has demonized LGBTQ people for years. Now it needs them to survive. Throughout its 50 years as a genre, contemporary Christian music has often functioned as a propaganda wing of the Christian right. Whether it's the war on drugs, Christian nationalism, colonial mission trips, or prayer in school, the industry has effectively used popular aesthetics to sell a conservative Christian message, often while demonizing outsiders. This is especially true of the LGBTQ community, one of CCM's most frequent targets. Whether a subtle jab, as in Scott Wesley Brown singing about fools who march for the right to justify their sin, or more overtly in the case of white rapper Carmen warning of the homosexual in San Francisco trapped in vile bondage. Prominent artists within the genre have often peppered their lyrics with reactionary homophobia. For multiple generations, this music was pumped into the ears of queer and straight children alike through music festivals, church camps, youth groups, and mission trips, often paired with similar messages about abortion, women's rights, and anti-socialist fear-mongering. But in the past 2 decades, the once clear lines between CCM and secular music has been disrupted, and some queer Christian songwriters have begun challenging many of the genre's long-held cultural norms. This is especially true as a wave of prominent LGBTQ musicians have come out publicly to an audience that once shunned them. CCM luminary Ray Boltz, whose Thank You scored countless evangelical funerals, announced in 2008 that his 30 years of attempting to pray the gay away hadn't worked and that he would be living his remaining years with a man. British worship vocalist Vicky Beeching, who The Guardian called most influential Christian of her generation, announced that she was gay in 2014, followed by Trey Pearson, frontman of the 90s Christian pop punk band Everyday Sunday in 2016. Although some queer artists have found success marketing their work to Christian listeners, they've often had to leave the rigid confines of CCM to do it. Preacher's Kid, recorded by the queer non-binary musician Semler, whose real name is Grace Semler Baldridge, quickly landed at #1 on iTunes Christian Albums chart following its February 2021 release, blasting its way past the megachurch soundtracks. Semler's music explores topics that would have been unthinkable decades ago, criticizing fame-hungry pastors and calling out mission trips as scams on the EP track Bethlehem. Preacher's Kid which flourished despite the support of the traditional CCM pipeline, is an indication of an industry at a crossroads. If queer artists are finding that they simply don't need the Christian music gatekeepers to live their truth and express their art, does CCM change with the times or double down on hate? Baldridge, for one, believes the success of Preacher's Kid shows that Christian music needs a big dose of honesty. It needs to deal with the fact that faith, like people, is messy and complicated, they told Vice. I think the heyday of CCM is over. The days of creating a Christian alternative to secular music the way they did in the 90s came to an end with streaming. CCM is going through a transformation and search for identity. Hillsong, the LA-based, celebrity-obsessed, quintessential cool kids megachurch, whose anthemic, emotionally rousing worship music is performed every Sunday morning, has commonly come to characterize almost the entirety of the CCM genre today. Conservative rhetoric wrapped in hipster clothing. Founded in 1983, the church has used the allure of access to famous congregants like Justin Bieber, Nick Jonas, and Selena Gomez to appeal to young worshipers more socially liberal than Christian music's traditional demographics. A 2019 study from the Public Regional Research Institute found that 51% of white evangelicals under 50 support LGBT rights, and compared to only 34% of their parents and grandparents. That divide has led Hillsong, whose beliefs are based in an offshoot of Pentecostal Christianity, to make statements that appear welcoming to the LGBTQ community, but only to the most surface level. In a 2015 blog post entitled, "Do I Love Gay People?", Hillsong founder Brian Houston said the church's convictions means it does not affirm a gay lifestyle or knowingly have actively gay people in positions of leadership, either paid or unpaid. This rhetoric is a watered-down version of the homophobia peddled for decades by the Christian right, as well as its most prominent mouthpieces. In the 1980s, CCM often functioned as an unofficial marketing campaign for the Moral Majority, a Christian political movement whose leader, Jerry Falwell, once referred to AIDS as a lethal judgment of God on the sin of homosexuality. DC Talk would go on to be widely regarded as the most influential Christian rock band of all time after meeting at Falwell's own Liberty University in 1987. In 1992's Socially Acceptable, DC Talk appeared to parrot many of the same talking points in a song that appeared to comment on the AIDS crisis at its height. Times are changing with morals in decay. Human rights have made the wrongs okay. As CCM grew into a commercial powerhouse in the late 90s and early 2000s, many of its artists were finding the genre artistically claustrophobic and began to spill over into the secular world. Jars of Clay, Switchfoot, and MXPX were beginning to appear on MTV, preceded by Amy Grant's Baby Baby a decade earlier. Five Iron Frenzy were writing songs that subtly address Native American genocide and police brutality, which most censors at the time missed. But queerness was still incredibly taboo, and for no one more so than queer artists themselves. While some straight Christian rockers could experiment with an androgynous or even outwardly effeminate look, such as DC Talk's lead singer Kevin Max, many queer artists have been forced to present themselves as conventionally heterosexual as possible. Growing up in Mississippi, Michael Passons had a lifetime of experience in the closet, which wasn't likely to change when he moved to Nashville and helped found the massively popular vocal group Avalon. As the feel-good soundtrack for every evangelical housewife in America, Avalon was under more scrutiny than Christian art rockers like Joy Electric or industrial rockers like Clank to be standard bearers for all the nuclear families that attended their concerts. The best way to avoid scrutiny is to have a wedding ring on, Passons told Vice. I wasn't wearing one, and I was almost 30 and wasn't dating, so I was under the microscope. There were rumors about me that weren't true, but some that were. While he wouldn't come out for nearly 20 years, Passons was kicked out of Avalon for being gay in 2003. His band members forced him to go to conversion therapy if he wanted to stay in the band, and he attended a few sessions before eventually dropping out. After, Passons said he could no longer find work in the Christian music industry. We had sold millions of records, Grammy nominations, a 5-year record deal with EMI, a real pinch me moment, and then I lost my way to make an income, had to sell my house, and was sleeping on couches, he said. Jennifer Knapp found herself navigating this cultural vortex in the late 90s and early 2000s when she sold 1 million albums, and CCM anointed her the Christian alternative to Michelle Branch and Vanessa Carlton, although she never would have described herself that way. Knapp, who grew up in southeast Kansas, wasn't raised in a religious household and said it was a culture shock to suddenly find herself entrenched in the evangelical world. While she said that it was initially exciting to explore her faith through her music, she encountered a number of purity culture tropes familiar to women who grew up evangelical, which conflicted with her identity as feminist. I would arrive at a show in a tank top and be told that I had to change before going on stage, she told Vice. People were asking me to be a spokesperson for sexual purity because I was viewed as one of the role models for young girls. I would tell them that I didn't agree with a lot of this, personally and theologically, and that cost me opportunities. Recording music in the CCM industry forced her to put her sexuality on hold for a decade. Knapp finally came out as a lesbian in 2010. But it's important to Knapp to note that she wasn't closeted during her years as a forefront of CCM and that she didn't leave because she was gay. She said that she disagreed with a range of ideologies of that world and found she couldn't write the song she wanted to within the genre's corporate propaganda machine. She got her master's in theological studies and married a woman and returned to music in 2010 with a new album and a publicly gay identity. Among the changes in Knapp's image in releasing her comeback record, Letting Go, is how the album was sold. Although her previous hit Undo Me and Romans had been favorites of radio programmers on Christian rock charts in 1997 and 1998, respectively, Knapp chose not to release any singles from Letting Go. The album was still a modest success, reaching number 3 on Billboard's Americana folk charts. The decision not to market the record for Christian radio reflected a conscious choice by Knapp to forge her own path and separate from the industry that once attempted to define and constrain her. Too often, CCM is made by Christians for Christians to make more Christians, she said. That undermines the experience of contemplating faith and spirituality through art. And that's what I wanted to do then and do now. CCM has mostly given up on artistry. It's just praise and worship music now. Although queer artists are creating music on their own terms, they haven't yet found a home in the traditional channels of CCM, which include megachurches, right-wing political rallies, and national Christian radio stations like K-Love, a kingmaker of the genre. Shortly after coming out, Trey Pearson was ousted from the Christian rock festival Joshua Fest. Michael Parsons came out in 2020, and while he is still making music, he has yet to enjoy the success that he did during the apex of Avalon's heyday. Parsons sang backup vocals on a 2020 cover of Avalon's Orphans of God, released by gay country singer Ty Herndon and Broadway staple Kristen Chenoweth. In order to keep making music within the extremely rigid confines of CCM proper, many LGBTQ musicians are forced to hide who they are. Marcia Stevens Pinot, a prominent figure in what history has dubbed the Jesus movement of 1970s California, would go on to form born-again lesbian music and discover a wealth of queer-affirming Christians that dug her music. But things weren't always so easy. After she came out as a lesbian following her divorce from bandmate Russ Stevens in 1979, the wildfire of gossip lost Children of the Day their booking agent, and the band split up soon after. Stevens Pinot said that many prominent producers and songwriters remain closeted to avoid the same scrutiny she and others have faced. The fact of their sexuality is an open secret, she said, even though they don't want you to talk about it. The first Sunday of every month is gospel music night at the gay bars in Nashville, and I see multi-Dove award winners there every time, she said, referring to the evangelical equivalent of the Grammys. The night before the Dove Awards, there's something called a pink party for all the gay nominees, and it's a super gay drag queens and the foundations of champagne type party. It's unclear where the sexual battle lines of CCM will be drawn in the future. Amy Grant and Kevin Max both received heavy criticism among evangelicals for their divorces in the 90s, only for the same communities to support thrice-married Donald Trump for president in 2016. And without the isolation that the 90s music industry provided, where evangelicals' parents only bought their kids the Christian version of their favorite rock band, it's difficult to imagine the industry existing in 20 years. But that's a pipe dream in many ways. So long as there's a Christian right in need of a popular culture set apart from Hollywood liberals, and so long as that movement uses social issues like trans people in the bathrooms and queer Disney characters to further its political agenda, there will be a need for a music industry that reflects the traditional American identity, however sidelined it might be in a given cultural movement. Although that still raises a question that CCM is struggling to answer. How powerful should such an industry remain if young people are increasingly jumping ship? Jennifer Knapp thinks it would be smart for the Christian music industry to open its doors to queer musicians if hopes to appeal to Millennial and Gen Z listeners, but she isn't holding her breath. There are evangelical queer musicians in those worship bands living double lives, but that market won't sign an out person until they're a financial competition. She said, they have the right to have their own type of quality control for Christianity, but at that point, it's not a genre that's supporting the diversity that Christianity has to offer.
Well, there you go. They got Trump in there, though. That was a good thing. Had nothing to do with the article. They just got to get Donald Trump in there. I thought that was kind of humorous.
I quit Christian music. I'm done. If these are the voices,
no, it's not. No, so
No.
let's take a quick pause break and try to get the perspective. This is coming from
these guys are like they're not even close to being Christians.
correct. They're not.
Vites are like Satanists, basically.
Yeah. So let's stay to the topic, right? So we got this is the next generation of woke Christianity, right? So we have this new woke thing where it's okay to be, homosexual. It's okay to have abortion, right? So these are the topics that we're covering, and we can see right here within the Christian music. This is no different than the music industry to the church industry. That these things are starting to cross the line of where do they lie? Where do people stand? And if you think those numbers were off the chart for abortion, the numbers are even off the charts for for gay affirming Christianity. And you're starting to see, especially as Elijah said, this millennial generation, we're starting to see it. So we're seeing the battleground amongst the people, and this is again, this is nothing new. This is what we're talking about. Like the Christian music industry, the churches, they are full of sin, and they are full of this, and it's all about affirming our sin. And once what's popular for DC Talk to and Scott Wesley Brown talk about the sin that you pride for and march for, now is going to be silenced. We're not going to talk about it. When was the last time you heard any mainstream pastor, any mainstream Christian artist who are going to just come out and say, no, this isn't right? We already went through Lauren Daigle when she's asked on it. I don't really know, right? She doesn't want to say whether she agrees or disagrees. She just doesn't want to say because she alienates one side of the group. And I'll go back to this and then we can start the discussion. We have more people coming out of the liberal party who are coming to conservative family values, who are starting to be more biblical than the churches, and the vast majority of them pander to the woke mob and thus become this new form of woke Christianity. And it is going to be acceptable. And before I say it, Reliant K went on tour with Similar. That was the artist that was talked about in there, and you can go watch the videos. She was the opening act for this. So we're already talking about people buying the tickets. They were sold out shows. It launched here in Ohio, Massachusetts. It was all over the place, and they had great turnouts. We got Switchfoot going right on Twitter and saying that we support Similar and support her, and she's her and her things we support, because she showed up at their show, and it wasn't, hey, everybody's, it was just everybody was welcome And of course, anybody's welcome to come to anything, right? A church door is open. It's a hospital. It's for the sick. It's for people that are sinning, the people who are in sexual sin, straight, gay, whatever. It's for them. It's for these things. Our ministry doors, they're open to all of that, right? It's now, what do we place as our basis of our faith? And yet we're seeing this crumble with this agenda. This is this was the first agenda, one of the first agendas, 1980s, 1990s, and now we're dealing with a whole nother ball of wax today. Okay, so before I know Robbie's ready to jump at the gun. So somebody share what their thoughts were right off the bat off that article, because that's the perspective that it's coming from, and let's try to stick to that realm, that topic of this woke Christianity.
Well, first off, I went to Gospel Music Week for like 10 years, and I'm trying to figure out where this drag queen show happened. I mean, I would have gone just to check it out, but
It's probably happening in the last 5 years.
Okay, so I haven't been in like 20. So
okay, so no names, Doug. Let's drop this. Okay, so you happened to walk in on a prominent artist, and what was happening? In a PG manner, because they have kids watching.
In a PG manner.
And Dirt was with you.
I and Jeremiah Dirt happened to walk into a hotel room where two men were pretty much going at it. If we did knock on that door, I don't think they would have stopped. And honestly, the artist was going to be huge. He was slated to be the next Kirk Franklin. And it just blew my mind.
And what year was that? What year was that, Doug?
I want to say either like 90. It had to have been either 99 or 2000.
Okay, so without saying the person's name, he did come out. It's fully gay. He changed his name. He goes by different artists today. And so he is one of these gay affirming Christians, right? Not only himself, he took over his dad's church. He was he became the pastor of that. Right. He's huge. Like, he would have been, like you said, the next Kirk Franklin. And ironically, you knew about these things, and many people did. It's not a mystery. Most people who know these things, they kept it secret out there,
Well, I mean, even Jennifer Knapp, who's one of the main basics of that article, I hung out with her on several tour dates, and she knew the words, she knew what she was talking about. I saw it written all over her when her first album came out. And I called it out to my friends, and they're like, "Oh, no way! Toby Mac would never have signed her to Goatee." And it's like, we were treading different waters now. And even back then in 98, 99, 2000 era, Christianity in the Christian music industry was evolving into a liberal state, and but it always has been, because let's be honest, the 70s and the late 60s, early 70s, it wasn't until the 80s where you could actually be fluent in Christian 101 and sing about it. You had Keith Green, but you had all these liberal artists coming out of the Jesus movement, whether it be through Calvary Chapel or Maranatha Records, or however you want to look at it. It was still liberalism. And it just got dormant because there were, quote, mega church pastors like Jerry Falwell, Jimmy Swaggart, PTL, and the like that were going against that part of the liberalism of the church and was a bigger mouthpiece. So, I mean, everything that they stated, Ray Boltz, whatever, Five Iron Frenzy, it's hard to call any of them Christians. For me, I know these people. I've hung out with these people, and I know we go back to like one of our first or second episode, and this is what I was stating. We have gone so far from Christ that there is no more Christian music industry. But there doesn't.
Well, I think the article was correct in saying that it's pretty much predominantly praise and worship music. It's by Christians for Christians. I thought that was interesting in the article. It said by Christians for Christians to make more Christians. Like it's a bad thing. CCM,
Right.
like, oh my goodness, we don't want to make more Christians, heaven forbid. But really, you're right. It has all been filtered out. It has all been filtered out because a lot of the motivations of these people were never about Christ. It was about fame. It's just the reality. I think it's the reality because overall the industries, people will pay for what they want. And over time, Christians that really desire to have a connection and a close connection with God, because I remember back in the Christian days, I used to be critical on Tooth and Nail, and I understood it, but I'm like, come on, man. There's not even one lyric. It was like anything would pass in Christian music. If they just said, oh, I believe in God. Oh, right on. Everyone congratulate. It's like, sign them. They're a good band. We want the numbers. We want to reach the world. So I think everyone was just, it was exploding. It was growing at a rapid pace. But ultimately, I mean, in a way, it's a judgment on the industry. It's just like God's just showing it right there. See, it was about me all along, and it will always be about me. So whether, it doesn't matter what you guys try, it will be filtered out, and it has been so far what we see. And let's not get into like doctrine and stuff like this, because even though they're saying stuff about Hillsong, notice that even the world criticizes Hillsong as not being pro-gay. They're like, they love gays, but they're not putting them in leadership, and they're not doing this, right? I think sometimes as Christians, we get so critical on other ones that really the world is coming against them as well. And the numbers are important as well. So I just think,
when's that going to, we've already known that it has happened.
I just think we focused a lot on churches. I think our attention needs to be on the war that is right in front of us, not against, let's talk about Hillsong all night.
Let's speak closer to the topic at hand. Right. So we have so many Christians who are seeing this, because what we're talking about is super sensitive topics, right?
Oh, totally.
Before I go on, and I'm not shaming anybody or saying anything, which I really don't have any issue with saying this, because he says it himself. We had a teacher on our platform who dealt with this issue. And dealt with transgenderism for many years. And, he ended up, we did have to say, this is not the platform for you, when he came out and saying that he was same-sex attracted. And same-sex attracted was not the problem. The problem was, this was my design of God, and this is what I will teach, right? If you, look, I get it. If you're dealing with, if you've dealt with homosexuality, it will probably be a lifelong trigger for you, right? Even through deliverance, right?
Well, if you're totally still struggling with something, you probably shouldn't be a teacher or a mentor or a counselor.
Correct.
That's all it is. You can still love someone and embrace them as a brother, like in that sense, if they're struggling through something. But this whole idea that like, they can be in front of a platform or a teacher or a mentor.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to so the point here is that this is, so this is part of this woke Christian mindset, right? Like we have to now create theology that allows for things that are very crystal clear in Scripture to be worked around to do this. So that's number one within woke Christianity is that you have to be somewhat have some sort of theology, right? And that theology has to twist and convert and change. And this is the first one, right? Is like, okay, we can take some passages and say, hey, this applies to, for example, you could take certain things to say, oh, when it said, a man should not lay with a man, oh, that's referencing pedophilia. That's not referencing homosexuality, right? This is a common Christian phrase to use here, right? Just like, one that our audience will be familiar with is that you have what Yahweh deems abominations in Scripture, and he lays these things out as abominations, and he mentions in the same breath homosexuality with the eating of unclean foods, and the list goes on, right? And so you see today, you go, you have ideologies and theology that that the church teaches, where it comes to Peter's vision, and that the law has been nailed to the cross, except for you have churches that will say, well, except for in this area of homosexuality, because it can be found over here in the New Testament. So we have to. It is a juggling of theology to create this, and this is the very stance, right? This is why woke Christianity exists, because we can change. If you listen to them, that is not one of their number one things. It is no longer an abomination to eat unclean, so it's no longer an abomination to commit acts of homosexuality within the confines of unfornication, of a marriage, or a lot of them think a lot differently. But this is that basis. When we start to strip away the word of God to fit our narrative, our belief systems, whether it be abortion, homosexuality, be these things, this, in my opinion, and let you guys talk after this, is the very basis, like getting back to the word of God, getting back to placing God's laws on a platform, to where they're not something that is shakeable, that not something that we can, as human beings, can say, God, I know more than you. Hold on, I got a better thing for you, where we just become as people, okay, God, we just trust you and believe you for what your word says, and we will honor and love you for that. And I think this is the starting point.
Well, I mean, I still am. That article made me mad, but I'm going back to my roots of like Cornerstone Festival and all of that, and bands at one point could stand up on stage. I mean, POD had a song called "Abortion is Murder," where they just chanted that through the whole song. Or Known as Invictum they stated, if you're pro-choice, you're pro-kill, innocent bloodshed, murder at will. You don't see that now. You don't see that in Christian music. You don't see it in music in general. It's like almost as if when I would have to say close to 9/11 is when you saw the shift of God being taken out of music, whether it was Christian music or secular music. I mean, POD wasn't allowed to say Jesus Christ, but they could say Jah. Michael W. Smith, yeah, he was singing praise and worship music, but there wasn't really, quote, a God that he was singing to, because he couldn't say that. He never said name Jesus Christ. Or not bad. But I'm just to the point where either you are or you're not. Either your yeses are yeses and your no's are no's. And, when you talk about the commandments and, the unclean stuff versus the clean eating versus the unclean, and the laying with man versus, husband and wife, it all stems to we are trying to accept sin.
That's true. Sin is sin. Everyone, talks about homosexuality, but adultery is the exact same. Sin is sin, right? And but oh my goodness, that person's a lesbian. Oh my goodness, that's a homosexual. What about all the adultery that was going on, all the fornication that was going on in the Christian music industry? What about all the drug abuse, alcohol abuse, right? It's all these visual things that people put on these big high podiums where they're like, oh my goodness, that's so bad.
But I think
sin.
But you know what, Robbie? Here's the difference. You ask an average Christian, is adultery wrong?
Uh-huh.
And the answer will always be, of course it's wrong. The difference here is now we're starting to say things that are what we would say are clear scripturally. They're saying are correct. Like,
no, I get that. My point is, though, if I had been in a band and I went up to the label and said, I got to admit, I'm in an affair right now. I'm adultery. They would tell me to leave the band or get right. They wouldn't allow me to continue on. My point is that we made a big deal out of like these
money you were making for that label.
Well, my point is, I'm saying that if someone was stuck in a sin, just sin, and they're struggling with it, they say, look, man, you got to step down for a while. You can't be up representing. When in the article, when they said, we want you to be a face of purity because you're going to influence a lot of young women. That's good stewardship. That is good to have people in an industry that say, hey, this is important. You are impacting the next generation of young women. We want someone that holds that. Rebecca St. James.
Well, what did she say? What did she say in the article?
She said, no way. She said, I don't agree with it.
It goes against her theology.
Correct. But here's the thing. Bottom line, guys, and it's very easy to sum this up. Satan infiltrates. Satan fully infiltrated CCM, the Christian music industry. He infiltrated every single industry. And I'll tell you, he's infiltrated the church. He's infiltrated the industries. So all we're seeing is not to say that there weren't good Christian bands that were found in that. But as a whole, it was 100% corrupted. Just like we look in the Bible, and every time, you know, they would see these miracles right in front of their face, and pretty soon they'd be grumbling and they'd be off worshiping idols. Look in the Bible how quickly people fell away from God continually. Right. So we can't really put ourselves up on a podium thinking like we're any different. I think we're all responsible for this. All of us are responsible for this because we might have sat there. We might have looked at it and going, well, I'm going to look at Hillsong. I'm going to look at this or look at my church. But we really, all of us didn't understand exactly the implications on how fast it could come, what the implications are when it came to our children on how quickly it could. I mean, there are cases pending right now where parents are losing their rights to their children for sex change operation surgeries. It's happening right now. This is crazy stuff. Imagine the panic, not just where your kids are going to go off for a while until they deem you okay, that they're going to give your kid a sex change operation, you know, and you have no say in the matter. These are horrifying times. All of us, I think, are responsible to some degree based on everything that we're seeing. And it's time for all of us to get really true and right and say, wait a minute, we've got to really be that light. We've got to be those ambassadors, because that article, one thing it said, I'll close out with this. It was interesting. In that entire article, did you notice nuclear family? Yeah. Nuclear family. I want to close with this. The nuclear family is public enemy number one. Wait a minute. You think it's the church? In the homosexual movements in the 70s, Hay wrote all his literature on how he was going to accomplish what we're seeing right now take place, which seemed laughable when you read his literature. He basically said it would be accomplished in all these different ways. But one thing he said, look, church is public enemy number two. Family, we need to crush the nuclear family. The traditional family has to be crushed. Margaret Sanger, going back to Planned Parenthood and abortion, we'll bring this around. She was 100% against Christianity and the nuclear family. Now, when we get into like money and we get into Kinsley, when it comes to all the stuff, when it comes to gender now, guess what? Those two guys hated Christianity. What's the common denominator, guys? We see this hatred towards the truth. We see a spiritual and a dark, sinister agenda, and it is sweeping everywhere, is infected. So what do? What's God calling us to do? That is what has to be our prayer now, because it's everywhere. Like, I didn't say that, hey, America's almost taken over by communists. It has been taken over. It has. The question is, can it be taken back? I believe very strongly it is going to be taken back. But what I'm saying is it has been taken. That alone should send shivers up people's spine to understand that right now it's under control of communists and Marxists. How in the world could that happen to America? Guess what? God's judgment. That's come to everyone. Everyone's being affected. Churches, good believers, faithful, Torah and observant, it doesn't matter. We're all under this cloud of judgment, even the church itself.
Elijah?
I think that's why the word of God is just so important, because it's our ultimate source of truth. I mean, you know, we're talking about the infiltration of some of these organizations into Christian music. We're seeing infiltration. As a parent, I'm like constantly having to watch every single thing I put my child in front of, because they're just getting into everything, and they're sneaking little things in here, and they're trying to brainwash at a young age. And so, you think of another verse in the Bible that came to mind while you guys were talking, every man did what was right in his own eyes. And I think with a lot of like woke Christianity, that's what we're seeing nowadays, is that people are not going back to the Bible and going back to saying, what does the Bible say? What does God say here? A lot of things in the Bible are very black and white, and Christians don't want to agree with that, because it's not socially acceptable nowadays. And so they have to justify and twist the truth in order to, fit their belief system or what have you. So, but going back to the Bible, constantly is the most important thing, just to have that rock of truth.
What will happen is it's such a slippery slope, right? So being in youth ministry for 20 years, we would ill prepare the students to go off to college, because we really didn't have a clue what was about to hit them, right? And you get your daily, you got your youth groups full of topicals, and they got, they got their salvation story, and they know a few verses in the Bible. They go off to college, and this is where that, for most of these kids, where this woke ideology that we're talking about today occurs and happens once the simple basis of science, right? Science comes in, changes them. Evolution starts to become, that creation stuff is just so far-fetched. And then eventually what we're seeing today is that it's just another layer on top of layer that these kids who are involved in churches, and they just start to strip away, right? They like Jesus, Yeshua of the New Testament, but everything else becomes it's not a part of my life. I can throw away Genesis, I can throw away this, I can start throwing away the little parts of here and there. And that's why I have even in the image, right, you have these young Christians, they really wear these shirts that say Jesus was woke, or Jesus was a liberal, and it's with the flags, and it's got all these things. This is that process. And I will tell you what occurs and what happens in nearly 90 plus, even more percent of them. So even if they claim faith and they walk nowhere near what the word says their whole life, and their fruit basket is completely empty, other than what they call the love basket, where they're nice and loving to certain groups of people, and their hatred towards other groups of people. That's the best that they can have. The worst case scenario is that just in a few years, they have completely and will walk away from the faith, right? When more things come in, more things come out, you got atheistic apologetics, you've got woke apologetics trying to completely kill even this woke Christianity, which is an oxymoron completely, as we've all discussed, and because it just doesn't exist, right? To be woke liberal Christianity is foreign from Scripture. And this is where these people start to go down. They start going down this path, and eventually, I'm telling you, it will lead to them completely abolishing even the Christ of the New Testament, and because they already have. And what I mean by that is, it tells us in John 1:1 that Yeshua, he was the Logos. He was there from the beginning. When you deny Genesis, you deny him. You have already tossed him out. And this is what's already happening in most young people. It's happening in When me and Robbie have talked about a topic in the past, we get very passionate about that topic only for one reason alone, because we're defending the word of God. Nut jobs look at us, make fun of us, because that's what happens. We are saying, hey, we believe what the word says, and we're gonna put our lives on that, and we're gonna say that this topic is important because Genesis is truth. Because if Genesis is truth, then that Savior that appears in John 1:1 is also truth, and vice versa. And that's all that we are ever trying to say and defend is these things. And that is the very difference between someone like us, who we will go on a limb and look crazy and foolish to this world and say, no, you weren't born this way. Well, yes, you were, because you were born into a life of sin. Yes, you were. You must die to this sin. Yes, you must stop this. We were all born a way that was sinful, that we still carry, that is not holy, that isn't righteous. And
It's a silly argument. Just because you're attracted or you have passions or lusts doesn't mean they're good. Like, it's a silly argument that people will use, right? Like, even if you use that argument that they were born with it, it's fine. What if you were born with the attraction of children? Doesn't make it right. Whatever your state is, it's even more reason why you need to repent and change. You need to, be born again. It's not a good state that you're in. God doesn't want you in that state. He loves you. He wants you to change.
Right. In the very essence of the gospel, right? We look at it and we glance over, the aspect of repentance, and in repentance of what? Of our sins. What is sin? The transgression of his laws, his Torah. And yet here are these things that want to get completely thrown out of our lives. And people who follow these things only think it's a matter of 5 things, but yet it encompasses our very walks, our guides for our lives. And they are to not be kept for salvation, but because of love and obedience and guidance in our lives. And without these things, we see the world fall and crumble around us. And it comes back to biblical manners. What are we actually teaching our children? Are our children going to fall victim to this? If we are walking correctly, not by the things we say, but by the things we do. That is the challenge for all men who are leading these homes, because we all believe in a nuclear family, a dynamic of a father leading the house, the woman in that supporting cast role, coming together as one, raising up children. And this is the biblical model, and it's not based on anything we say. It's based on everything we do, which is a challenge to every single one of us, myself included. And this is how we fix woke Christianity. Get into the word.
Well, and honestly, one thing as well, too, keep in mind that, when I was talking about multiple generations, if that is to play out, notice that the sick, twisted, perverted left, they're not just not having their children, they're killing their children, and they're also mutilating their children, and they're sterilizing their children. So guess what happens if the other side continues to be fruitful and multiply? Guess what, guys? It's a game. It's a numbers game. So it is very important, if you're a young family, you're starting out, have as many children as possible. Don't think it's weird or, this, what, 3 kids, 2 kids. It's like, people are so far removed from the ideals that God set before. And I'm just saying,
he's in his 50s having kids. So.
I'm
50 and I'm still having children. It's crazy.
Well,
trust me. It's crazy.
I want to end on this. For me, I just had a really good friend ask me, with being a probation officer in the juvenile court, what do you find is the most common denominator in why these kids do what they do? And
I know the answer.
And I have to, and I'll be honest, 100% honest.
Yep.
I have several families that have full house loads, a mother and a father. And the main contributing factor that I see is that there's one of the parents are missing out of the equation, whether it be a dad or a mom.
Yep.
And
The prison system, that's what it is. The prison system, I think it's like 90% fatherless. Like, it's unbelievable if you get into the statistics across prisons and you get into it's alarming.
It's just an alarming factor.
It really is.
And when you see it, and you see it day in and day out, and you, like, for me, I become that only male role model in that kid's life. I feel bad for that kid, but I try to be as Jesus as I can be without leading to getting fired. But the reality is that a house needs two parents.
It's crazy. You work in correctional, right? Like, you're in the correctional or juvenile, right?
I work in the juvenile. I'm a juvenile probation officer.
Isn't it crazy though how America literally kicked the Bible out of public schools, but yet they allow the Bible into prisons and into the correctional system?
Yep.
Isn't it wild?
Churches to come in every Sunday.
I know. They would not allow that in a public school.
Nope.
Would not be allowed at all. Isn't it interesting how Satan works, right? It's just very interesting, when you start cluing into what's going on. But I'll tell you one thing: you want to look at the progression, fatherless homes, a prayer out of schools. You can pinpoint these progressions when all of a sudden these things, 10 Commandments, were out of the courthouse. You just saw this complete degradation of societies. Any society that removes God is about to see insanity. Yep. And that's exactly the Western world. Get ready, buckle up. We're about to see how crazy it can get. Sodom and Gomorrah, like the joke is always, God's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah if, judgment doesn't come quick. Judgment's already come, right? And that's the thing, is when you start seeing, you view it in a spiritual lens and understand exactly how dire the situation is, and where your heart pleads out and you're kind of saying, God, like, this is serious times, man. Like, it is unbelievably serious. And that is true judgment. When God literally, and here's another thing too, no matter where you stand on the whole lockdowns across the world, it is the only time in recorded history where the entire world, including all churches, were locked down. Even the churches that stayed open, they locked down for maybe 2 weeks. And they said, no. The fact of the matter is, it's never happened in the history of man. Something significant happened when the entire world locked down, including all the churches. So I'm saying we're in a whole different realm, end times, whatever you want to say. I'm just saying we're moving into a period of time where it's extraordinary. And if all of a sudden we have multiple generations left, the next generation is the most important. And as fathers and as men, as being leaders of our family and our marriages, we have to take that super, super serious. And our main priority is our family, right? We protect them. We provide for them. That is our key responsible. God will do the rest.
Go ahead, Doug. You want to finish, Doug?
I think that we're getting to a point, and I've been saying it, where the Holy Spirit's hand has been slowly lifted away from, whether it be just America or the whole earth in itself. But I think that this has been being played out for a long time, and it's nothing new to people like, I even think people like us, because we've all researched, we've all studied this stuff, whether it be...
Fun fact, research Putin and what he's trying to institute in Russia. It's very interesting on a spiritual level. You're kind of like, what's he against? The woke Christian agenda? He doesn't want it in his country. It's just really bizarre when you start seeing these things play out in your world, and you're like, okay, the media is telling me this is Hitler and this is evil. And yet I'm seeing he wants to be traditional. He wants the nuclear family preserved. And you're like, that's a God thing. Maybe I should be beside people that are supporting true things like not murdering. Again, very tough to get an abortion in Russia.
Let's put it this way. I had people say it to me when Roe v. Wade got overturned and all that stuff. Well, Christians need to step up then. Well, how about we make adoption, cheaper than $17,000.
Correct. Agree. 100%. Yeah, that's ridiculous. It's
if you don't want your kid, how about letting me adopt your kid for whatever a birth costs?
And maybe on a future show, we'll have the discussion on, should the LGBT adopt children? That would be a whole other discussion at another time. But yeah, no, I agree. There's so many deserving parents that would love those children. And again, it's okay. Understand, guys, we all have been adopted into God's family. We're all adopted sons and daughters of the Father. Adoption is the paramount of what God is instituting on the world. When Chris said at the beginning, I didn't want to correct you, but when people say, "Oh, we're all God's children," no, that's actually false. We're all God's creation, but we're not all God's children. God has his sons. It says they're sons of God and they're sons of Satan. So I just want to make that distinction because a lot of people say these things just really quickly. And I've said it myself before in the past, but we're all God's children. We're all God's creation, not all God's children.
Sorry. I don't mean to laugh. I just read one of Elijah's being very patient.
Yeah, go ahead, Elijah.
Go, Elijah.
Wrap it up. And no one's going to interrupt you. And
Wait a minute. Josh and Johnny have been really quiet tonight.
I know. And by the way, we've missed Johnny and Josh tonight. So, next show we'll make sure they're there. I think Johnny's sick, and I think Josh is dealing with the kids tonight. So, all right, go ahead, Elijah. You're gonna wrap this up and then close us out tonight, and then nobody's gonna say anything else. You've got the last however long you want.
All right, great show tonight, guys. Enjoyed the discussion. I'll leave it at this. My last 2 cents on it are: guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. They're coming at you from every angle. They're trying to brainwash us. They're trying to come for our children. They're trying to corrupt us. They're trying to distort God's truth. So guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And we'll leave it at that.
Awesome.
Thanks for joining us tonight, guys.
All right.
See you in the next show.
There
Critical
it is.
theory. That's good.
There it is. Although we may get banned for that. So there was
free on his website. So
I think everybody enjoyed the chat tonight. So we're going to be able to work in some more of these types of shows. We're not going away from doing music only stuff. We had our fun time doing that. So we'll bring in some of this discussion.
It's nice it's just a release sometimes because the world's so crazy and you just do good music and you just forget about how crazy things are. So I actually do enjoy just the music shows where we're just getting into like, oh yeah, it was a good band and I went to this concert and come on.
Yep.
Like
we will get back to that.
Bobby's top 20 fight of hip hop and rap. That was
a battle. That's why we took it off. I mean, these guys fought so hard.
That was fun. That was good.
But
What is
hey,
the next one?
it
What
was
is
a
the next one coming up?
conversation all the way to audio feed between me and Dirk.
Well, we are 11 minutes or 12 minutes over schedule. So, guys, we are going to say goodnight. Thank you so much for hanging with us in the chat room. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That's the only way we grow, especially if you share it. And again, Sound Off is brought to you by Born Again Sound, your one-stop shop for things you really don't need. CDs, cassettes, and vinyl, but you really want them. So, all right, guys, you guys have a good night. We will see you guys real soon. God bless.
Yeah, blessings, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Right.
The breath in my lungs just can't hold me. No man. Start a revolution with no man control me. Sound off. Start a revolution with the breath in my lungs. Sound off. Sound off. Sound off.